to another video. Today I'm here again with Mr. Philip Burt, bike fitter extraordinaire, and today we're going to be talking about cleat setup, and you're going to tell us how to set up a cleat.
Simply. I think people often get really stressed, really over anxious and overcomplicate cleat setup. You should set your cleats up the way you walk. Now that might sound odd, but some of us walk like ducks, like this, and that basically means that you land with your heel in and your toes out, right? And some of us walk in a straight line, and some of us walk what we call pigeon-toed in the physio trade. So you turn your feet inward. You might already know this about yourself. If you're one of those people, I recommend that you set your cleats up on the bottom of your cycling shoes to reflect that. So if you're duck-footed, you set your cleat up so it allows your heel to move in towards the crank as you pedal. Walking is the far more dominant thing in the back of your brain than pedaling. We're not born with the ability to pedal. We are born with the ability to walk. But we all walk in slightly different ways because we're given different biomechanics, genetics, injury history, everything like that. Some of us are better at moving. Some of us are slightly more challenged at moving. There's a load of things behind all that. But if you set your cleats up, first of all, in that sort of position, you're probably getting more towards what I call that window of fit where it's going to work, all right? I don't think there's much joy in fixing your cleats. So going for a completely fixed cleat, some people can survive that. That means you've got no float. But my God, you've got to get that in the right place if you do it, because at 90 revolutions per minute on average, that's a lot of wear, a lot of force going in exactly the same place every time. Some people want to do it, some people can do it, right? Much better to have a little bit of float so that you've got a little bit of wiggle room. The more float you've got, the more room for error you've got in terms of setting up your cleats, right? Or I would simply look at it, the more opportunity you have to put your foot where you want to as you're producing the power, which your body's normally trying to do to align your knee and hip so it produces power to the pedal and it doesn't hurt and it doesn't give you pain, dysfunction and injury. So having that cleat set up is really important because it allows our feet to go where they want to. They mostly want to go where they want to go because you walk, even Bradley Wiggins, Chris Froome, Vingegaard, they walk more than they cycle. So even the very best of the people don't have a different pedaling style, in my opinion, to how they walk. They take the walking biomechanics, they put it on a bike and then they fine tune it. Common things to look out for though, if your cleat setup is wrong, would be, for example, any knee pain on the outside of your knee, where you're feeling there, or on the inside of your knee. Trust yourself. If you're pedaling and it just doesn't feel right and it feels like you can't get your foot where you want to and you feel constrained in any sense or fashion, that could be down to cleat setup. However, don't demonize cleat setup for all the other things that could be going on in terms of your bike fit. Quite often people coming in here panicking about their cleat setup and that actually they got some fundamentals about saddle height and other things wrong. My last and most simple tip with this though is I would always set your cleats as far back as you can because I know no reason to set them far forward. And if you set your cleat far back, it means your foot moves forward of your knee in the pedal stroke. That's the same as not overextending in the lunge in the gym, all right? It's the most common reason in cycling to pick up anterior knee pain, that's pain at the front of your kneecap, is normally having your knee come forward of your foot in the most powerful part of the pedal stroke, which compresses it. So if you move your cleats backwards, you take care of that. It's gone. In fact, if you look on some of the online communities, a lot of people will argue that a more rearward facing cleat, or what we call arch cleats, is more powerful because it's shortening the lever arm. Whether it is or it isn't, for me, it means that you can get your cleat in a nice, safe position. Once we've got your cleat in the right position, either forwards or backwards, and we've got it orientation right, either you want to drop your heel in or you want to drop your heel out. The last thing to consider is whether you're going to set it up more towards the inside or more towards the outside. So my tip with that would be, if you're duck-footed and you want to drop your heel in, I would move the cleat towards the inside because it moves the foot further out, allowing you more room to drop your heel in without getting cramp rub, right? There isn't much variation in this, so don't stress about it. You're not going to muck it up. And because most people are riding a carbon fiber shoe, you're not going to really feel where the cleat is in terms of inside outside. One thing to note with that, if you have it too far towards the inside and you feel like your foot's rolling over the outside of the shoe, that can be something, sometimes some people feel, we call it waterfalling, you know, but it has to be quite extreme to do that, all right? And if you're pigeon-toed, you can have your cleats ever so slightly more laterally like this, so it allows you to adopt that position. But the main one is that I tend to find is people moving their cleat towards the inside slightly if they're wanting to drop the heel in, just gives that bit of clearance so they're not going to get the crank rub, and they've got the room to move it without hitting the crank or the chainstay. Finally, mountain bike cleats, so much easier set up because they have so much more float. Main thing to remember, in my opinion, set them all the way back, okay? And then secondly, you can orientate the cleat ever so slightly this way if you're dog-footed, and ever so slightly the other way if you're pigeon-footed, but really a lot less stressful because you've got so much float, you're probably going to get to where you need to be anyway. So in summary, set your cleats up in the way you walk. Choose a pedal system that reflects you and what you want to do. So if you want to drop your heel in, you need a pedal, a cleat or a pedal system that allows you to do that as you cycle. And thirdly, move the cleats as far back as you can to be safe.
If you're setting them up as you walk, is that going to cause more problems? Because I always think you should set them up in a way that's kind of like resolving any kind of weird ways that you walk. Is that like a thing?
So at first principles, you're absolutely right, Katie. All right, is this not? So a lot of people would argue that your knees should go straight up and down when you're cycling, right? The first thing you learn is not hardly look at any video of a pro race. You'll see lots of people with circular knee patterns, all right? I've got no problem if your knee comes in and out ever so slightly when you're cycling and your foot moves a bit, if that means that's the optimal, most efficient way for you to be. We all have what I call our preferred movement pathway, all right? To try and make that fit into a box is a bit like bike fitting to numbers, yeah? You try and shove everyone in the same box and say, you will pedal this way. I wish I can tell you how hard it is for me as a physio to change the way you move. Is incredibly hard. Walking is on a CPU in the back of our brain, and it's incredibly, the most amazing thing about it's very, very hard to change. I think we take those biomechanics, that preferred movement pathway, and we adapt it to pedaling. So pedaling is a little bit different, but it's based on that base model. So no, I think you're the opposite. If you try and set yourself up differently to the way you walk. So for example, if someone was pigeon-toed, yeah, and you put them in the heels in position, their knees are going to get painful very, very quickly because their iliotibial band, the way their body works, everything is preconditioned to being like this, not being like that. If you walk in in a slightly different way, very, very pigeon-toed or very dog-like, you have to spend a bit more time getting your cleat or pedal system set up ideally. Honestly, 60-70% of people out there could throw them on any way they want to, and they might not even notice. It doesn't mean it's going to be optimal, but they're probably not going to break down, you know. My bigger piece of advice is, like, if you set the cleat up in a very neutral position, so say like a 6-degree yellow Shimano cleat, and it's in line with the thing, and we'll show you a picture of this, in line with the last of the shoe, and it allows you a bit. Most people aren't going to run into problems with that, and will find it quite comfortable, and will get on with it.